let's look at one of the key factors in all of this equation, the electorate.
Sure.
You know, in terms of how we vote, because I mean, some wonder, do the politicians give them enough credit? Because in time past, they barely even just go to them, but to just do it as a way of maybe papering over cracks or do it for the sake of doing it because they know that at the end of the day, they know what they have to do to get victory. But now, it's looking completely different. If you look at how we voted in the past, some on political lines in some cases, and then on individual lines in other cases. So one wonders, at the end of the day, even if the candidates come up maybe last minute, if you could phrase it like that, wouldn't the people, or wouldn't they say, well, we have our structures across the state, across the country, so as long as whoever is the presidential candidate comes up, whenever he comes up, we just deploy machinery and reach the people. And reaching the people doesn't mean they're going from house to house. They just do it in a generic way.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the electorate, and my sense is that we must begin to give more and more credit to how the electorate is responding to the power of the vote. Unlike before, where it was almost a done deal. Once a few people meet somewhere and agree on what's going to happen, they go and play it out there. We're actually beginning to see incumbents being defeated in elections in Nigeria, at least in some of the state elections that we've seen, those states, Ekiti very recently. And what that begins to tell you is that the electorate, even in Oyo at that time, and I emphasize the fact that the younger generation have a stronger role to play. Many of them, and then the power of the media, power of the social media as well. So information is going out there and permeating much deeper than it used to. So it's not just a done deal if you present a candidate. If you don't present a sellable candidate, it's going to be a problem. So I think it's sensible for anybody who wants to win at whatever level to begin to look for sellable candidates. Now, from what I know in a few of the posturing that's going on as prelude to 2015, I know that these parties are shopping for credible candidates. It's no longer going to be business as usual. Even for the House of Rep, Senate seats, they're actually going and people are saying, look, I can deliver better. And even though we know the horse trading behind determines quite a lot of it, that horse trading is actually based on credentials. It's no longer favoritism. Oh, I like Maokbe, let her go for it. Somebody's going to say, no, Maokbe is not going to deliver.
But that still is a factor, isn't it?
It's a factor. It's a factor. But what I'm saying that it's being influenced largely by the way the electorate has been reacting. They go behind the scenes, they come back, and then something different happens. Otherwise, why would Fayemi, with all that was taunted about his achievements in Ekiti, lose?
But how do we...
Some things don't add up.
Yeah.
So, and that's because we're ignoring the power of the electorate.
Okay. How do we even further situate this power of the electorate? Because in one breath, INEC says that initially at that time it was about 70 million registered voters. Then the latest figure, if I'm right, about 65 million now. So that seems to be dwindling. But on the other hand, the electorate is said to be stronger in determining who becomes what.
Well, there's one thing to have registered voters. There's another thing to have those who actually go out and do the voting. In almost every client, if you get a 50% turnout, that's pretty high. And all that. It's unusual. Okay, in the Scottish referendum, you got up to 70, 80 in some of the districts. That is absolutely phenomenal. But generally speaking, 40, 50% of the electorate are the ones who actually go out and vote. So whether it's 65 million, whether it's 70 million, on the day of the voting, and we've seen it in many of the elections that have taken place, when you go ward by ward, where the numbers are much smaller and manageable, 500. You go to a ward of 500 voters, the actual people who go out to vote are perhaps 200. And that's consistent throughout the entire electoral map. So we're looking at, and then you know a lot of things go on when it comes to registration. So you're not quite sure if those numbers are the numbers. But it's when you go out to vote, especially with a system by which it is becoming more and more difficult to tamper with votes. what you go and see on ground largely does not reflect what on paper is supposed to be the registered number of votes, which is again still good for our democracy. Now, the only concern that I have is that in situations where these elections have taken place in smaller parks, like Edo, states of 2, 3, you could deploy security forces to go and ensure that sanity prevails. But when it's going to be general, where there are going to be close to 70-80% of seats up for grabs, you're not quite sure if you have enough security personnel to make sure that they can protect the votes. That's the only concern I have about 2015 on a general platform. But by and large, I'm willing to say that the voice of the electorate is being heard, and anybody who wants to win should listen to that voice.
What are some of the calculations in terms of, regional affiliations to, political parties? Do you see, can a political party say we strongly have this region and we believe that we'll be getting all our votes, or we'll get a reasonable chunk of votes, from a particular region? Can any political party,
again,
say that?
I'm glad you asked this question, because if you see, if you look at the demographics going forward, that factor is beginning to play less and less prominent a role. Whereas 10 years ago, we could confidently say, oh, the stronghold in the Southwest is, well, not APC, then whatever name it was. Or if you went to some part of the North, it is XYZ. It's getting more and more mixed up. And political arrangements and rearrangements are taking place to the point where you can no longer say, not even the Lagos that we all are so happy is well governed. If the APC rests on its oars, they can be overturned. And I know PDP is looking at Lagos with strong intentions. Now, what do all these portend? Good. For good. They portend good. It means that politicians will have to work harder to convince the electorate that they should go with them. So it's progress overall, if you ask me.
Are you afraid that a certain streak of desperation might also creep in?
Well, the problem is that, yes, there will be streaks of desperation, but what do you do about it? You just must convince people to vote for you. And don't forget the fact that politicians have a way of balancing themselves out. So if you get desperate to the point where you want to resort to parliamentary methods, you can easily be balanced out. So what's going to happen in the end is to convince people that you can deliver. And my prediction is that we're going to see much better quality candidates going forward. From office to office. You're not just going to get anyone, throw it to the electorate and think you will win.
Let me bring it to Lagos now, because when you spoke about the PDP looking at Lagos, it now looks as though they look rejuvenated, the PDP, sure, especially after the Ekiti victory. But then they went to Osun and they made a brick wall there, because the participation and the way people followed that elections from local government, from ward to ward, they had their figures even before INEC could eventually calculate and come up with theirs. But speaking about Lagos, what I spoke about the FEC and their valedictory session, Musila Manikoro's name popped up there, and one wonders, okay, what's the arrangement with him? Is he coming to Lagos to vie for that political seat? And if he were, what about the speculations that, who knows, Jimagbaje may also, some groups want him in the PDP. So if that happens, they have to slug it out. And then for the APC, you have touted names as Ambode, one of them, Senator GOS, Hamzat. You have so many who will eventually come into the fray. So if that happens, it promises to also be very interesting in Lagos.
Look, as I told you, the winner here is democracy. And the winner here, the people of Nigeria. Because some of the strongest opposition, ironically, is coming from within the parties. So it's not even, we've not even gotten to the point where They're presenting candidates
so test their internal democracy.
internally. Yes, some of the greatest opposition is internal.
Do you think that the parties will survive it?
Yes.
You think that the parties will survive it? That
the internal testing the
yes, we're looking at the APC
yes,
at the presidential level, looking at the PDP at the state level.
Yeah.
Do you think that they will survive this wrangling within the party?
Yes, I think they will survive it. First of all, politicians have a way of working things out when they get to the brink, because in the end they all have one common interest. If this polity is not maintained, if democracy is not protected, they all lose out. So they know what they're doing. But what is happening is that the voices for change are getting stronger and stronger. So the days of anointing are almost certainly over. Or even if somebody gave you the privilege to anoint, then you better anoint somebody who can be sold. Don't anoint somebody just for the heck of it. That's what you're hearing. Now, in the past, where you would never have had opposition voices once the big man has spoken, what's going on in Lagos? How come, in spite of what we're told is a preference of some of the kingmakers, you still hear other people gearing up and saying we're going to do this, and they are really serious about it? So again, I take a holistic view of that within as an index for how our democracy is developing. And that is that as we progress from election to election, you're going to have people being tested on their merits to serve. And that is why whoever is going to succeed Fashola, the minimum they can offer is at least match his achievements, whether you're coming under the PDP or even under the APC.
I'm listening to you, and I'm tempted to be optimistic as well, but we know that oftentimes things don't always pan out how we think. Do you see a reduction also in terms of post-election court cases?
Well, that's a business. So yeah,
so I'm not going to business law.
I'm not going to bet on a reduction, but whether it would have this sort of impact, I think politicians are getting more and more sensible. They're beginning to weigh what their chances will be like before they rush to tribunals, or you must have a truly genuine grievance. And then there are more new directives from the NJC about how judges should conduct themselves when it comes to election petitions. So you don't have cases outlive the mandate that's been given, because that's part of the problem. A man stays in office for like 3-4 years, and he suddenly declared that it was wrong for him to be there in the first place. And that's why you're having these staggered elections in different climes. Will there be less appetite? Not necessarily, but would it have any serious impact going forward? No.
Well, Mr. Judge Etomi is a legal practitioner. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you.
So there you have our first helping of looking ahead of the 2015 for this segment. We'll have another one coming up in just a moment. Please join us again.